Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm the City Witch, and today we're going to be reviewing Cunning Words, a grimoire of tales of magic written by Marshall W.S.L. Now, if you don't know who Marshall is, Marshall on social media is known as the Witch of Southern Light, and you can find a link in the description of the video to Marshall's Instagram if you'd like to go ahead and check out Marshall's content. And especially if you like what I say about this book, then you will definitely enjoy Marshall's content on their social media. Marshall is also the co-host of a podcast where they talk about various different witchy topics, and if that's something that interests you, I would say go ahead and check that out as well. Now, please be warned, the podcast is about an hour to an hour and a half long for most episodes, and when I first started listening, although I enjoyed every single episode I've listened to, I also wished in the early days when I started to listen to the podcast that I'd had a pen and paper handy, because they recommend so many books, so many authors, so many different websites and places to get information from, and I missed some of it because I didn't write it down and I wasn't able to then go and look it up simply. I'd have to re-listen to the hour and a half long podcast in order to find what I was missing and then write it down. So I do advise having a pen and paper ready for when you listen to the podcast so you can make notes and then you can refer back to those notes as needed. So let's talk about Cunning Words, a grimoire of tales and magic. So the first thing I want to say is this book is very enchanting and extremely inspirational. I enjoyed every story, every spell, every little detail. I think this book is utter perfection, in my opinion. The book captivated me so much that I just simply could not put it down, and before I knew it, I'd read it in a single day. Yes, you heard me right. I read it in a day, guys. I actually read it in an afternoon, to be specific. But because I read it so quickly, I don't feel like I digested everything from it properly or the way I was supposed to. So I ended up going back and reading it again. And this time I really took my time and I read each of the stories, the little fairy tales that Marshall has written. And then I paired it with the spell or the charm or the little thing you're supposed to do later in the book. And I could really see from the fairy tale written how the spell came to be or how it was passed down from one witch to another. So I do recommend when you read this book that you read it in order and you start with the fairy tales and the stories that Marshall's included, which is the first chapter, before you get to the practical stuff that's a little bit later on in the book. Now, because I took my time the second time around, I think I got the lessons more clearly. I understood them more and I could see the idea, the logic behind the spell and the reason for the spell, the purpose, the need for it. And I think that's very important when you're going through this book. The book is highly influenced by folk magic, traditional magic, and in particular, traditional English witchcraft. There is definitely echoes from books written by Gemma Gary and Roger J. Horne. And Marshall does say that they took inspiration from Gemma Gary and Roger J. Horne in order to write this book, and that those creators influenced a lot of Marshall's personal craft and practice. So if you like folk magic, you're drawn to traditional magic, and you're an English practitioner and you want to practice English traditional magic, then definitely this is going to be the book for you. You will find contained in the pages of this book many folk-based spells and charms and creative ideas that are all very simple to do. You will also find that the book flows as you read through it, and it's very enjoyable and easy to digest. I don't feel there was anything in this book that was too complex, too complicated, or too difficult for any practitioner to do. So for that reason, this is a really good book for a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced practitioner. And because the book is quite inclusive and universal friendly, you can include all of the content of this book easy in any type of practice that you choose to do. It's very adaptable. The book does focus very heavily on spirit work and archetypes, so if that's something of interest, then you're definitely going to enjoy this book. Each spell and charm is accompanied by a folk story, a little fairy tale that Marshall wrote, which is the inspiration for the spell, or perhaps the spell inspired the story. It's obviously going to be one or the other. This was a fantastic touch, in my opinion. I absolutely enjoyed each and every story in this book, and I took a lot from each and every one of them. Every tale told contains an important lesson, which is why I went back and read them again. And I do think you could keep reading them over and over and over, and I think you'd learn something different each time you read it. The cunning witch would be able to use the lessons in these fairy tales and stories to their advantage and apply the information and the knowledge given to their craft and practice. Each story takes you on a magical journey, and you learn about lots of different characters and practitioners as you go through each story. Some of these characters don't start as witches, they become witches, and some of them have information and knowledge passed down through generations, which they build upon. In these stories, there are some hard-hitting subjects, so be warned. You will encounter death and betrayal, cursing and hexing, dark practices, as well as practices for good and for protection and for healing. So these stories take you on a truly magical journey, and I enjoyed every single story. There was not a single one that I thought was boring or not needed or anything along those lines. And if Marshall ever chose to write a book just with stories like this, I would absolutely 100% buy it, and I'm sure I would absolutely enjoy it. Definitely one of my favourite sections of this book was section 1 with the stories and the fairy tales that Marshall has written. So let's take a quick look at the content. So what you're going to get in this book is a lot of doodles, sigils and patterns and drawings, all of which are designed and created by Marshall. I do want to read you this bit because this bit is very interesting. This book is magic. It is marked with cunning knowledge. The words within are twisted and miraculous. The images represent figures and archetypes who never were and always have been. Blessed by the 3 mothers and the 7 holy siblings, this book will offer protection and refuge to all those who seek it, unless they be your enemy. Within lies the guile of the man in black, the endlessness of the lady of other, and the prismatic spectrum of the divine androgyny. This book is loving. This book is cruel. This book is full of life. This book is full of death. This book will charm. This book will curse. This book is marked with cunning knowledge. This book is magic. I thought that was a very powerful page to include in this book. And then this is something else I want to read as well, and you will find an explanation for this and a use for it later in the book. But again, it's something I just wanted to read out because I just really enjoyed it, and it sort of struck a nerve with me and made hairs on the back of my neck rise up and stand on end when I read it. So I'm going to read it out to you now. Meet me at the crossroads where the man in black does stand. Meet me at the crossroads where he offers me his hand. Meet me at the crossroads with the serpent and the crow. Meet me at the crossroads, to the other world we shall go. Oh, love that. That now, to me, is almost like a tune. I generally sing that on a regular basis, and I hum it as well, like it's a song that's been sung to me over and over, and it feels like it could almost be a nursery rhyme or a song that matches a fairy tale. So here's where we get to our content. So you're going to get a dedication, an introduction and a preface, and then the book is split into 3 sections. Section 1 is called Cunning Tales, a collection of stories and magic. So this is all the stories and the fairy tales that Marshall has written, and included in this section is Spirit Contracts, The Hidden Book, First Flight, Our Mother in Red, Our Mother in Green, Damned Devil's Berries, The 3 Wise Healers, Our Mother in Black, Open Roads, For the Love of Myrtle, and I thought that was a cute play on words, Witch Bottles, The 7 Holy Siblings, Life, Death and Pine Cones. And then in section 2, We have cunning rhymes and magic in verse. So this is incantations, prayers, songs, chants, things that you can add into your practice to include alongside a ritual or spell casting you're going to do, or something that you could sing while you are beading together a bracelet or making a charm or empowering a poppet. So under this section, we have cunning oil. So there's also oils, elixirs and recipes in this section as well. An elixir for protection, crossroads nails, a lucky charm, bindweed, song of the Cicadia, and I hope I'm saying that right, so my apologies if I said it wrong, befuddled, climactic sigil, petition to the oak, the gift of the paper doll, the wrathful river spirits, invoking the witch's devil and the witch queen, the red meal. And then in section 3, cunning compendium, a codex of grimoires, rites and extrapolated charms, spells and curses. We first have a preface, which includes the magic square of the old ones. And then we go into the section and we have as follows. Of water, salt and dirt, contracts with a herbal familiar, the fashioning of charm bags, a doll of dough, poppets and synthetic rites, flying ointment, chanting the beads, Gran's grimoire, the red book, the green book, the black book, the three wise healers, a revelation of the sisters who never were, and rites of the flaming tree and other charms of the heart. And then we end with prayers to the 7 holy siblings. So the 7 holy siblings is actually one of my favourite sections in the book, and you get the holy siblings twice. You get them in section 1, where we talk about the holy siblings, and Marshall lays out beautifully this kind of story where he brings the siblings to life. And to match that, you get a sigil, which incorporates the planet energy as well. And I'll explain that in a moment. And then at the back here, you get prayers and the planetary sigils to work with those siblings. So the siblings, so I'm just going to show you the 7 holy siblings, 1, 5, 2. So let me just get to the siblings because I really want to show this to you guys, because this was my favourite section. And I am going to read this out because I enjoyed it so much, and I think there are other practitioners out there who'll enjoy this as well. So with the 7 holy siblings, you get this sigil designed by Marshall for each of the days of the week that is ruled by a planet. And we know this to be true, and it's in occult philosophy. So what Marshall did was Marshall created this sigil, giving them a character, a voice, and energy, something you can work with and use and include in your craft, and then gave them a story. And from that story, you can take information on how to work with these archetypes. So the first one. There once were 7 holy siblings, and the first was called Sunday. He was devoted to the sun and worshipped at the solar temple. He was a strong, powerful protector and had the gift of healing illnesses of the body. He always smiled, bringing happiness to all who sought him. His dwelling was covered in sunflowers, marigolds, and dandelions. So straight away, we know that the day is a Sunday, that it's ruled by the sun for the solar temple. We know that he's a powerful protector and a healer, and we know that he brings joy and laughter and happiness wherever he goes. And we know that we can invoke him for all of those qualities. We also know we can make offerings of sunflowers, marigolds, and dandelions. So there's a lot of information in that short bit about the first holy sibling. So you know how to tap into the energies of Sunday just by using that information. Now I'll read you the rest. The second sibling was called Monday, and she was devoted to the moon. She resides at Temple Luna by the sea, adorned in moonflower. She was a water priestess and the keeper of dreams. She was known for her gift of intuition, insight, and empathy. She was a great oracle, and people came for miles to seek divination services, water, and moon magic from her. The third sibling was called Tuesday and was devoted to Mars. He held court at the Martian temple and armory. He was a great and virile defender. His gifts of brute force and strength made him the champion of the people, and he led armies in victorious battles. With him on your side, no challenge would be too great to be accomplished. The fourth sibling was named Wednesday, and they served the temple of Mercury, adorned with dandelions and lavender. They were the head organizer and messenger of the siblings, having the gift of encouraging or calming discourse. They were a keeper of memories and thoughts and a great philosopher. They were a wonderful public speaker, and people would travel to the temple to seek guidance from Wednesday in matters of travel, business, and new opportunities. The fifth sibling went by the name of Thursday and was the head of the Golden Temple of Jupiter. He was the most loyal sibling, a great leader and advisor in financial and legal matters. People came to him for gifts of wealth, prosperity, and improvements in familial and social standing. Supported by his sibling Mercury, he was known to aid in a thriving business and opportunities for success and gain. The sixth sibling was known as Friday, and she was the most beautiful. She devoted herself to the temple of Venus and kept a harem of lovers around her. She was a great poet and supporter of the arts. People came to her to find romance and aid them in marriage and fertility. She gladly bestowed gifts of beauty, love, and friendship to all those who sought her Venusian temple. And the last one, and my favourite, the seventh and final sibling was called Saturday. He stood guardian at the Black Temple of Saturn and was known to be stoic and nocturnal. He was a great magician who trafficked with spirits and was known as the keeper of curses and bindings. Surrounded by nightshades and thorn trees, his temple only saw the bravest and most determined of visitors. They brought gifts of farm goods and once a year called upon him to bless their crops with sacrificial blood. There once were 7 holy siblings, and now you know them all. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. They stand sentinel of their temples, and every 7 days each in turn reigns supreme, bringing you their presents and gifts all week long. All you have to do is ask. And then you've got a beautiful image here that you could incorporate into your practice to kind of worship their temple, which kind of is linked, I guess. I love the way it's designed. So beautiful. And then here from the author Marshall makes a point of saying that this idea, this concept, comes from occult philosophy, and it's kind of an old idea, but Marshall puts a new spin on it and makes it simple and easy for you to understand. And so you can tap into these energies through these archetypes that Marshall has created with these sigils. And I think that's a wonderful and very inspiring idea, and certainly one of my favourite parts of this book. The book itself is jam-packed full of information, and each spell, charm, everything in this book is accompanied by beautiful art or illustration that Marshall has designed. You will find enchanting poems, stories, and incantations throughout this book, and you will see sigils, symbols, and images that can be used in your craft and personal practice. The book is mostly black and white, but there are some splashes of colour in it dotted throughout, and I'll show you in a moment. I personally really enjoyed the way the book was laid out, how it's presented, and I liked the little colourful details that were added. The book has a very old worldly feel to it and makes me personally feel like I'm reading an ancient tome and where the information has been around for an extremely long time. So I'm just going to give a quick flip through to show you some of the imagery in the book, just so you can see it. Just so beautiful. Marshall is a very creative artist, and if Marshall ever created art, I think I would definitely buy it and add it into my personal space, just because I think it's so crafty, so creative, so beautiful. I mean, look at that. The choice of colour there, it just pops and it really draws your attention. There's a particular image in this that I absolutely adore. And that one's in the section called, oh, here we are, For the Love of Myrtle. I think that is probably one of my favourite images in the book. The tree just really stood out to me. I love the colours used, the pinks and the reds. It's just so beautiful. And then as we progress through the book, we can see all of the sigils and the designs, the colours. You can see how different scripts and magical writing is used. You can see here how Marshall has created sigils and seals that you can incorporate. Here we talk about crossroads nails, and you can see how you're supposed to put it together. So you can use all of the imagery in your craft and practice very, very easily. Look at that, beautiful. So again, this is kind of tapping into some of the siblings' energy from the days of the week. We have some pop-it magic. There we go, more sigils that you can use. Now, this is something else I wanted to talk about. So here Marshall talks about witch's black salt, and there are many recipes and many different ways to make it out there. There's so many influencers on TikTok and social media that teach you how to do this. Marshall kind of gives you their version of how they do it. But one of the interesting spins that Marshall gives is they remind you how salt is actually very toxic to the earth. And if you're somebody like me who likes to return your herbs to nature so it can decay naturally and so the energies can dissolve into the earth, especially if it's a positive spell and it's for personal use, you kind of don't want to chuck it away in the bin because that's the wrong energies. So when you use salt, salt is toxic, and therefore you can't then put it back in nature if salt is mixed in. So you end up then putting it in the bin, which, as I've said, is wrong energies. But if you replace black salt with black ova powder instead, you can add that to the earth, and it's actually very nourishing and nutritious for the earth. So ova is the Latin word for egg. So you can actually grind up eggshells and have that instead of the salt to make witch's black ova powder. And that's something that Marshall talks about here. And I thought that was fantastic. And straight away, that was one of the first things I did from this book. And I now make so much of it that I have jars and jars of it ready to go. And I use black ova powder more in my practice than I do black witch's salt. So that's definitely something that I personally found interesting that has added to my craft and practice. There is talk about dirts in here and how to use them. There is bags and sachets, charms, poppets. Here we have flying ointment and an incantation that matches it. Here we have the creation of beads, and if you check on Marshall's social media, you'll see that Marshall likes to create jewelry. So this kind of came from that for me, and I was really excited when I read this, and I actually went away and made a bracelet based on the idea here, and it's something that I really enjoyed doing. It was very folksy and it gave me a lot of joy to do it as well. There we have stuff about wands. So here we're looking at oils that you can make. There's a lot of recipes and tinctures that you can play around with. We have sigils that match some of them as well. Here we have two different ideas behind the witch's bottle, and these ideas come from one of the stories at the beginning of the book. So read that first. Then we have the red book. So we have protection, power and potency, red fire, the 36 knots of healing, self-confidence, charm, safe travel, breaking a hex, wish upon a bay leaf. That's a classic. Then we have the green book, which is kind of your healing section, working with herbs and herbal familiars and spirits. And then we have the black book. Now the black book is darker magic, so be warned, there is some curses and hexes in this book, and to me that is fantastic and I love that, but not everyone is going to enjoy that. So here we see to inflict untold malefic intent upon a trespasser, to compel and control, a spoken charm to give someone the day they deserve. Loved that one. Banishing powder and return to sender. And then we have the three wise healers. Now, the three wise healers, if I remember rightly from reading this book, that was inspired from a piece of photography that Marshall came across that really struck a chord with Marshall. And you'll probably recognize it as soon as I talk about it. The piece of artwork was of three women dressed in black, red and white, I believe, and they were holding three different colour foxes, and it was a very popular image that travelled around social media for a long time, and you can see that image on Pinterest, on I think it's even been used on Etsy before. It's definitely on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure it's been used somewhere on Facebook, and if you Google it, it'll probably come up straight away. It was very, very popular, and because that was so inspiring to Marshall created the three wise healers from it, focusing on the energy of those three foxes, the red, the black and the white. And that was fantastic to me. I knew exactly the picture that Marshall was talking about. It got me very excited. I enjoyed the story, and there is a story that matches this at the beginning of the book. And then here we have some information about that and some charms that connect to the three sisters. So absolutely fantastic. And then right at the back, we have talismans for the 7 holy siblings. And this is how to work with the planets and the days of the week together. And you get an incantation for each one as well. And that kind of concludes the book. So what do I think about the book? So the book is packed full of information, each one accompanied by art and illustrations, sigils, poems and stories and incantations. All of it is inspired by beautiful stories and fairy tales that Marshall has incorporated, and it's definitely something that the crafty practitioner can use time and time again. I do think a lot of these stories could be really good for a young practitioner, perhaps between the ages of say 12 and 16, that's thinking about getting into witchcraft, but you kind of want to see how they react first to some of these witchy stories and see what they get from it to see if they're ready to practice witchcraft. And I think that certainly there are some witchy parents out there who might read some of these stories as bedtime stories, and obviously that's at the discretion of the parents. I personally wouldn't read some of them, but some others are really good, really interesting, and really quite cute stories. Now, do I have anything negative to say about this book? Well, I really struggled to find a negative, to be honest, guys, and I really don't think there are any negatives. There is nothing in this book that I felt broke any rules or shouldn't be in it or was quite dangerous or irresponsible. There was no spelling mistakes, no grammar errors. There was nothing that made me pause. There was nothing that made me doubt or question the book and the content. There was a lot of things that made me think and, you know, kind of rethink my practice. And there was definitely things that I wanted to digest and contemplate and meditate upon before including it in my practice. And there was things that I wanted to thoroughly understand the logic behind. But that was good because that was Marshall making me think. It wasn't me questioning the content. It was me wanting to understand it on a deeper level. So there was nothing in this book that I thought was bad or wrong or toxic or anything along those levels. But I will say this book is not a step-by-step guide. So if you are the kind of practitioner that is brand spanking new to witchcraft, so you're a novice and you're looking for a step-by-step guide, something that will teach you the basics of witchcraft, this isn't it. If you want your hand held, if you're the kind of person that needs an instruction manual to your magic, this is not it. This is a book of knowledge that you can include in your practice, but you have to understand the content and know how to dissect it and incorporate it into your own practice. And therefore you need to know what your practice is first. So it's perhaps not the right book for a novice, but it is the right book for a beginner that's been practicing for, say, about 6 months. That would be my advice. The other thing about this book is it does include some darker spells such as hexes and curses, which I personally really liked, but there are practitioners out there, especially those who might come at this book from a Wiccan perspective, who might sort of not enjoy that content. So please be warned that you will encounter a lot of traditional witchcraft, which we know is both baneful and positive workings. So this for me was a very balanced book that contained a lot of information that I really enjoyed from cover to cover, and therefore I score it 10 out of 10. Thank you so much to Marshall for writing it and putting this content out there. I do hope you'll continue to write and produce more books of this nature. And if you do write a book with all the stories and fairy tales that you've created, I would absolutely buy that copy, because I just loved the stories. Definitely one of my favourite aspects of this book for sure. So thank you so much to Marshall for creating this book. I highly recommend it to any practitioner out there. 10 out of 10 from me. A fantastic book. And that concludes this review. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to give me a thumbs up and click the bell so YouTube will tell you when my next video comes out. If you'd like to offer light, love and support to my channel, you can do that through PayPal or my Amazon wishlist. Both links are provided. If you'd like to book any of my magical services or contact me for any advice, tips or knowledge, you can do that through Facebook, Instagram, X and via email. And if you want to start a witchy conversation about this book, please go ahead and I will answer and include myself in the conversations as they appear. Thank you very much for watching this video to the end, guys. I do appreciate the support, and that concludes this video. So take care, and I will speak to you all very soon. Blessed be.